When a city goes dark block by block, the public sees a chaotic, unpredictable explosion of random violence. Viewing these events through a binary lens of good versus evil, or attempting to trace an entire global conflict back to the personality of a single leader, is an analytical dead end. Constant media coverage focuses heavily on the interpersonal drama between these political figureheads. That hyperfocus obscures the actual mechanical reality of how state apparatuses function. Global chaos is an illusion. Modern warfare is a highly complex, quantifiable system operating on strict strategic and mathematical rules. To evaluate the true trajectory of any modern war, intelligence analysts construct a rigorous 16-parameter framework. This grid categorizes raw intelligence into 4 distinct pillars: actors, motivations, capabilities, and dynamics. Mapping empirical data directly into these columns strips away ideological bias. We replace emotional guesswork with structural logic, exposing exactly how states organize and deploy their resources. To predict whether the globe is genuinely moving toward a third world war, we first have to build this geopolitical system from the ground up. In the first column, actors, we start with the decision makers. These are the highly visible state leaders and military commanders who officially declare action from international podiums. Those formal leaders operate alongside shadow brokers. These are the unacknowledged funders, oligarchs, and cartel networks that finance campaigns and manipulate policy strictly from the outside. Then we have the shapers. These massive institutions define the legal, intelligence, and material boundaries of any conflict. A primary example of a diplomatic shaper is the UN Security Council. This international body of 15 member states is tasked with establishing the legal thresholds for global military interventions and economic sanctions. On the military side, we observe codified alliance networks, such as NATO. This intergovernmental military alliance standardizes defense pacts across 32 member states. The final actor is the population. In this matrix, we evaluate the population strictly by their strategic utility. We separate the critically aware minority from the highly manipulatable majority, which states leverage to manufacture consent. Analysts who fixate solely on the decision makers miss the reality on the ground. The shapers and shadow brokers are the ones who actually fund and frame the war. In the second column, motivations, we observe that state actions are rarely driven by sudden moral awakenings. The primary driver is economic and resource control. States routinely weaponize global trade routes, choking off maritime straits and financial networks to starve their adversaries. The second driver is political survival. Leaders intentionally ignite external conflicts to distract their citizens from severe domestic economic failures or internal crises. A state of war allows governments to invoke sweeping emergency powers. This consolidates internal control and effectively silences domestic opposition under the guise of national security. Third, we measure ideological and security drivers. States engineer a strict us versus them dichotomy, leveraging historical or religious divides to unify that manipulatable majority we identified earlier. At the extreme edge of this security motivation is the doctrine of the preemptive strike. This occurs when a state's genuine existential dread of annihilation forces them to attack first. By isolating these specific motivations, analysts calculate precisely what a state is willing to sacrifice in capital and human lives to achieve its strategic objectives. The third column is capabilities. An amateur analyst assesses a nation's power strictly by counting its active tanks and ground troops. Historically, overwhelming conventional mass, like the massive global reach of a naval carrier strike group, served as the ultimate metric for superpower capability. Yet, modern states possessing these massive conventional advantages frequently fail to control the actual trajectory of regional conflicts. This vulnerability comes from asymmetric power. Smaller actors bypass conventional militaries entirely, using cheap, highly mobile assets to strike directly at economic weak points, like commercial cargo shipments. States also strategically fund and deploy proxy militias. This allows governments to project force and continuously bleed their adversaries without triggering a direct attributable retaliation. Overwhelming kinetic mass proves useless if a nation lacks the specialized capabilities required to counter deniable, asymmetric warfare. This diagram represents a national supply chain, illustrating resource sustainability. A nation's absolute limit is defined by supply chain resilience and energy independence, not frontline ammunition. Economic war chests dictate how long a country can absorb a systemic shock before its internal economy collapses. Next, we evaluate cyber and information capabilities. These operations are designed to paralyze critical infrastructure and break civilian morale, all without a single physical shot being fired. Defending against these advanced threats requires highly specialized, localized technological systems. The Iron Dome, for example, is a mobile air defense network designed specifically to intercept and destroy short-range rockets threatening civilian infrastructure. The final capability parameter is strategic depth. This is the sheer geographic and demographic buffer a nation possesses, determining if it has the physical space to absorb an invasion, retreat, and regroup. Long-term survival in modern conflict relies entirely on infrastructural resilience and strategic depth. Every engagement is a calculated war of attrition. This gauge represents our final column, dynamics. The interaction of actors, motivations, and capabilities funnels into a single predictable trajectory we call the escalation ladder. Conflicts do not spontaneously ignite. They begin at step 1, an increase in political rhetoric, diplomatic posturing, and narrative tension. The friction then shifts to step 2, economic warfare. States deploy targeted financial sanctions, freeze foreign assets, and enforce strict trade embargoes. From there, it leaps to step 3, the ignition of proxy conflicts, utilizing non-state actors to wage deniable violence on a state's behalf. Step 4 involves the launch of massive, coordinated cyber and information operations designed to internally destabilize the adversary's civilian population. This pushes us to step 5, the threshold of physical war, characterized by limited, highly targeted military strikes that cross sovereign borders. By tracking empirical data across our parameters, analysts prove exactly which rung of the ladder a global conflict currently occupies. This brings us to the ultimate question. Are the isolated regional conflicts we see today synchronizing into a unified movement toward a global war? The upper tiers of the escalation ladder, steps 6 and 7, represent sustained, theater-wide warfare. They require the total military mobilization of the civilian population. But the absolute apex of the ladder is step 8. This is the threshold every analyst monitors with dread, the deployment of extreme, non-conventional capabilities like nuclear or biological payloads. Reaching this final tier is not an accident of history. It is the mathematical outcome of all 16 parameters aligning toward total destruction. By stripping away emotional narratives and applying this architectural matrix, we see the mechanics of conflict clearly. We transform the terrifying unpredictability of global war into a decipherable, measurable calculus.